Hey, this is Evan Marquette, the dating coach for smart, strong, successful women. Your personal trainer for love. Welcome back to the Love You podcast. This is a place where you can learn everything there is to know about dating, relationships, sex, and men from a man's point of view. And not just any man. I've been doing this for 20 years somehow, and I'm still not bored with it. Still love doing these podcasts, still love helping women. So there you go. Today's episode is how to break your bad dating habits. It sounds really broad. We're just going to do a dive on one specific client that I'm working with. And through that, you're going to be able to see some reflection of your own bad dating habits, undoubtedly. I don't want to get too heavy, but this is pretty serious stuff. This involves, for some people, this feels like life and death. It becomes a crisis of confidence. It becomes a mental health crisis. It becomes a quality of life crisis. And so it's important, the kind of stuff that we talk about here today. And I'm very grateful that you're listening. Since you are listening, you've made it this far into the podcast without turning it off, go to Spotify, go to Apple, subscribe, leave us a positive review. Thousands of you have us in their top 5 podcasts, which means a lot given the number of podcasts that there are, somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 million or something like that. So just the fact that a few thousand of you tune in regularly to listen means that we're making an impact, and it's all thanks to you and your support. So let's begin here. We're going to call her Bonnie. Bonnie is in her early 50s, never married. This is not an unusual story. I know the last podcast I did told another story of a woman who's in her early 50s and never married. She's got a great smile. She's got a warm heart. She's got a big brain. She's got a broken man picker. That's a terminology I use anyway. It doesn't mean you are broken. It means the GPS that you use to navigate dating and relationships and men is off, and it has been off historically. And it's not something that generally just fixes itself. Often it's not even installed. So I want to tell you a little bit about Bonnie, once again, without outing her, once again, without embarrassing her, because what she's going through is so very common, human, unfortunate, and you may see yourself in her behaviors. So remember, these are behaviors. This is not a mark of her character in any way. Bonnie has a penchant for younger men. She dates guys who are much younger, generally over 5, often over 10 years younger, and they are attractive, invariably attractive. That's the draw. And that's sort of raised her standards for what she comes to expect from men. But the men are never really in the same place in life as she is. She very much wants to have a partner, to have something that is a long-term relationship or a marriage. And the hot younger guy she's choosing never seem to be that guy for her. So why does she do this? Well, she sleeps with men for any variety of reasons. In and of itself, it's fun. But from the outside, I'm guessing she's having fun. She's getting some comfort. She's getting some validation, right? It feels good. I'm a guy who slept around. That's what I did in search of a wife. I was sleeping around for a pretty long time. And it feels sort of temporarily good. And ultimately, it kind of ends up feeling hollow. Why does it feel hollow? Is because you're kind of spinning your wheels. You're cycling people in and out of your life. You're using them. They're using you. But if you're not really building anything, it all kind of, there's only so much you could enjoy the novelty, at least so much only I could enjoy the novelty of new experience before I realized that this is just a way to keep busy. It wasn't getting me to my ultimate destination, and I certainly think Bonnie feels that way. It's just something that, in the absence of having a real partner in life, she tends to resort to sleeping with guys who never really treat her like a priority. The next piece of this is that she accepts this. This is her normal, and it's like a drug. It's a drug that feels good, certainly feels good in the moment, but in the long term, it ends up feeling lousy, really lousy when she looks around and sees other people that she knows who may not be as attractive, may not be as sexy, may not be as bright, may not be as smart, but they have a partner who is loving them unconditionally, taking care of them, putting them first, thinking every morning how to make their day better, listening to them, validating them, taking care of them emotionally, giving them the feeling of being seen. It's hard to get that when your default dating relationship is largely transactional, and the transaction is sex. You could be a sex positive person, and I consider myself a sex positive person, and not demonize it, not judge it through any lens of morality, and still say the experience itself might feel empty, especially if you actually long for more. If sex is all you want, then that's a perfectly viable life choice. But that's not what Bonnie wants. So she takes this drug, the attraction and validation from younger men, right? And she's been taking this drug for close to a decade, right? And it's a metaphorical drug, not a literal drug. So she's been taking this drug for like a decade, and it always feels good at the beginning, feels bad at the end, when she's staring at her phone, waiting for him to text, waiting for him to call, waiting for him to step up his efforts. And she knows that this is not really what the guy that's going to give her the life she wants. And these guys know this older woman that they're sleeping with is not going to be the one either. Like that's the unstated business at the beginning of the relationship. These are things that you can't say out loud, so we just, you sleep together, and you kind of hope that nobody brings up what's obvious, that this is doomed ultimately. And so she works with me, and I encourage her to go online, stop, quit the younger man habit cold turkey, and go online. What happens when she goes online? She declares there's no attractive men her age. And I've done a number of podcasts on attraction. I'm not going to mansplain attraction to you. I am not that arrogant. At the same time, I recognize that even if indeed most men are not attractive to you, there's always going to be a percentage that are. There kind of, sort of has to be. If there's not, you're entitled to that feeling, but nothing a dating coach is going to do is going to change your view of men. So for her, she's been eating filet mignon. That's these hot younger guys who are sleeping with her, and now she's downgrading to just a basic top sirloin or something like that. And she's discovering that men in her bracket, 50 to 60, just don't look like they do when they're in their late 30s. I would be inclined to agree, says the guy in his early 50s who thinks he looks kind of like he did in his early 30s, but the camera does not lie. So she's feeling really, really dissatisfied by what is left for her, because she's trained herself that what is attractive are, and again, it's not even trained herself, it's empirically attractive. Men do the exact same thing. That's the other reason I'm not remotely judgmental, is if I were coaching men and a man went online and said, Evan, I can't find a single woman, right? The only women I'm attracted to are women in their late 30s. And I'd say, buddy, you're in your mid 50s. Yeah, but some guy in his mid 50s gets that woman in her mid 30s. Why not me? That's fine. But a lot of those women in their mid 30s are not looking to date a guy who is closer to their dad's age, right? I don't blame him for being attracted. I don't blame him for trying. There's a certain point when the results aren't there, you got to pivot. And so that's the thing that Bonnie's having a hard time doing, is pivoting. Right? Here's what I've been doing for 10 years. Yes, it makes me sad. Yes, I'm dissatisfied. Yes, it feels good in the moment. But what you're offering me, and you've heard my various metaphors, right? I talk about the hot unavailable guys as steak and ice cream. And then people come to me and they think I'm telling them to settle on rice cakes and kale, and I'm saying I'm not asking you to settle for rice cakes and kale. There's healthy chicken, teriyaki, and vegetables that taste good, is good for you, and you can dine out for the rest of your life on it, and it'll make you happy. But people tend to be binary thinkers. It's either the hot 39-year-old personal trainer guy or everybody else is unattractive. And so she's been spoiled in a strange way by hot younger guys who use her for sex, but don't think of her as girlfriend material. And that's where the lack comes in, because she's internalized this. She's internalized this to the point that she even wonders if she is girlfriend material. If most of the past 10 years has been caught up in situationships, friends with benefits type things, right? it's hard to see yourself as girlfriend and wife material if you have agreed to these terms where you're not expected to be treated as a girlfriend or a wife. So using my language, my love you language, Bonnie's positioned herself as a perpetual intern. She's negotiated a deal, a contract, where she sleeps with guys who don't have to be exclusive, don't have to call in advance, make plans for dinner, escalate their efforts, say they love her, meet her family, plan for the future. These guys don't have to do anything, and they get to keep on sleeping with her. And it works for them. Why? Because they could do that once every week or two and still be on the hunt for someone that they want to be in a long-term relationship with. It's not one or the other. It's not a binary. So these guys could be theoretically relationship-oriented guys or not. We don't know. But all I know is Bonnie's not getting her long-term emotional needs met. She's getting her short-term physical needs met. And that is her baseline. Right? That's where she's settled. That's where she's maybe feels comfortable, even though from the sounds of it, it doesn't feel very good. So she's created a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you're listening to this and you have a moment of either self-recognition, that's good. Or if you have a moment of feeling holier than thou, like, I don't do that. I don't sleep with hot younger guys who don't respect me. Put that on pause. Because the fact is, most people I know, most people I work with, have made a life of settling. They're just settling on different things, right? So maybe you're not just being used by a hot younger guy for sex. Maybe you're in a long distance relationship that has been going on for 5 years and you haven't had the courage to get out of it. Maybe you have chosen a guy who in the first 6 weeks said he's not looking for anything serious or looking to get married. And now you're going on 2 years with him and sort of hoping that your love overrides what he told you at the very beginning of the relationship, even though he hasn't brought up marriage and he's not inclined to bring up marriage. You know, if you bring it up, the whole thing's going to explode. Maybe that's you. Maybe it's more casual than that. Maybe you've just agreed to the very common situationship where you see someone once a week indefinitely, right? And it's open and it's casual and it's fun and no one's making any demands on anybody's time. But everybody's also sort of wasting time, in my belief. If you're relationship oriented, every second you're with the wrong man is a second you're not looking for the right man. Every date you go on with your situationship guy is a day that you could be going out with your future husband. But you're holding on to that because it feels good temporarily. So these are all versions of the same thing. So if you're accepting behavior that doesn't feel good and you don't want to be in this position in 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, like Bonnie, you got to do something differently. And it starts with the power of belief. If you don't believe that you can do better than this, you're never going to do better than this. If you believe all you're worth is a text, maybe a dinner, maybe some sex once a week, that is literally what you're going to get from men. Wherever you aim, that's what you're going to not attract, not in any sort of, law of attraction spiritual way. You're choosing it. You're consciously setting your sights, and that is the greatest heights that you're going to scale because you're not aiming higher for the top 10% of men who could offer and want to offer more than that. So I'm going to use a metaphor. It doesn't always go well, but it's something that's been bouncing around my head for years. I may have used it on a podcast before. I think of, and I want you to consider 3 women who are identical. Let's just say they are equally intelligent, equally attractive, come from the same exact background, went to the same high school. Right? It's an impossible thought experiment, but you get the idea. So these are 4 women who graduate and then go on 4 different career paths. One of them gets a job, and everything's theoretically open to them, right? That's the equality part of it. One of them chooses a career working at a motel and turning down beds, and she's making $11.50 an hour. Another one takes a white-collar assistant job, and she works for a big company, and she makes $50,000 plus benefits, and that works for her. Another person says, well, why would I be the assistant to someone when I could be the person who has the assistant? So she goes out and gets a master's degree, and she is now making $125,000, and she's got the assistant And then someone else says, well, why shouldn't I be the person who owns the company where all these people work? And I could have the $125,000 employee and the $50,000 employee working under me. And I don't really have a salary cap. It could be millions. What's the difference between the 4 women? Where they aimed. That's it. Where they aimed is where they landed. And I know that's simplistic and I know there's a million variables, but I really want you to consider the possibility. Not that you could go be a millionaire just by aiming higher, but certainly if you aim higher, there's a better chance than if you aim lower. But when it comes to dating and relationships, whatever you settle for is what you're going to end up with. If you settle for guys who have low integrity and are cheaters, you're going to discover there's a lot of cheating men out there. Right? If you have if you're a good judge of character, you set healthy boundaries, and you leave at the hint of any guy whose word doesn't match his deed, you're never going to end up with a cheater. I had no cheaters in my life. My wife has had literally all of the men before me were cheated on her, right? And again, it sounds like I'm slamming my wife. It's not. She tends to like charismatic men. Charismatic men very often think are women magnets and think the rules don't apply to them. So we all have our ways of settling, and we have our own bad dating habits. And that was, remember, the title of this podcast is How to Break Your Bad Dating Habits. The first step is recognizing that you have bad dating habits. If you don't have a relationship right now that makes you feel safe, heard, and understood, there's something we can do differently. At any point in time, I've done some research, I've done some polling of my listeners. 20 to 25% of the people listening to this podcast are not single. They're in relationships and they're looking for relationship help, but they're dissatisfied. Right? What I've told everybody is no one's ever come to me with a boyfriend and ended up with that boyfriend. Right? It doesn't mean it's impossible to repair your relationship. I'm not anti-couples counseling. I am saying quite definitively that if you are in a long-term dissatisfying relationship, chances are you made a mistake in the first couple months of dating and you're paying for it months, years, decades later. The important part is to be able to break free from that pattern and realize if you're dissatisfied with the relationship as it is now, right, and he's not going to change, it's incumbent upon you to do something different to produce a different result, because otherwise you know exactly what your life is going to look like 1 year, 3 years, 5 years down the road. So if you don't believe you can do better than the relationship you have right now, I respect that. But if you suspect that you can, I want you to know, I've got you. I believe in you. I see you. I'm going to help you. You do not have to do this alone. So before we go, you may be beautiful, you may be smart, you may be successful, you may have everything going for you, but your self-worth is an inside job. Here's how we're going to address it. I'm doing a 5-day challenge. It begins this week, actually. I got my show notes here. It begins this week. Register on the link in the show notes or go directly to evanmarkatz.com/challenge. 5 days to rediscover your confidence, take charge of your love life. In those 5 days, you'll learn why confidence is the foundation for lasting love. You will break free from self-doubt and patterns of settling. You will embrace your self-worth and set clear standards for relationships. You will discover how to show up confidently in dating and attract the right partner. And you will envision and create a love that feels easy, supportive, and joyful. And it starts with one simple, free, easy step. www.evanmarkatz.com/challenge. I can't wait to see you there. My name is Evan Mark Katz. This is Love You Podcast. Thank you for listening. Subscribe on Spotify, subscribe on Apple, comment on YouTube. The challenge, the challenge for you is to take the stuff that you listen to and learn and implement it in your life. And that's why we do those little 5-day challenges. It's a short, finite period of time where you could focus on your love life, you could focus on your self-esteem, and you could focus on having a different result in 2025 than you had in 2024. Thanks again. I love you. I appreciate you. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.